Welcome to this explainer where we're going to explore the hidden costs of the global steel industry. All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're looking directly at the SASB standards, specifically the disclosure topics for iron and steel producers. We need to unpack this massive tension that's affecting both global markets and, quite frankly, local lungs. We're going to break down the hard data on what's actually pouring out of the smokestacks of one of our most essential industries. It really makes you wonder, what exactly is the invisible price of building the modern world? I mean, steel literally builds our civilization, right? It's in the bridges we drive over, the skyscrapers we work in, our cars, our infrastructure. But producing all that steel, it comes with a severe, highly localized cost that most of us just don't see. Well, unless you happen to live right next to a mill. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the hidden cost of steel, then look at localized public health impacts, key pollutants of concern, expansion in emerging markets, and finally, the regulatory constraint.
Section 1. The hidden cost of steel, zooming out on a global industry.
Before we can even begin to fix a problem, we absolutely have to understand where it comes from. Iron and steel producers are the fundamental backbone of modern infrastructure, no question about it. But the very nature of creating that steel, we're talking about melting down ores and scrap at incredibly massive temperatures, inherently releases significant emissions right into the air as a byproduct. And this isn't just some accident. It's the current chemical reality of the whole industrial process. Alongside the vital products we desperately need, these mills are pumping out hazardous air pollutants.
Section 2. Localized public health impacts, zooming in on the fence line. Now pay attention to the precise wording the SASB sustainability accounting standards use here. We always hear about global greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And sure, those are huge planetary issues. But the standards explicitly carve out air quality as its own separate critical disclosure topic. Why? Because of significant localized public health impacts. These are not abstract, faraway problems. We're talking about immediate, severe health threats to the very communities living right on the fence line of these production facilities. It is a hyper-local problem and a very human one at that.
Section 3. Key pollutants of concern, the biological threat assessment.
So what exactly are these people breathing in? These are the exact chemical culprits that sustainability standards require companies to track. Under disclosure topic EMIS 120A.1, steel producers have to report air emissions in metric tons for some very specific pollutants. We've got carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur oxides. Then there's particulate matter, or soot. We've also got heavy metals like manganese and lead. And finally, volatile organic compounds and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Honestly, this list reads like a vital threat assessment for public health. These are the compounds linked directly to respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular issues, and broader environmental toxicity. Let's break down a couple of the most notorious offenders on that list, starting with particulate matter, specifically PM10. This is airborne, finely divided solid or liquid material. Basically, think soot and dust, with an aerodynamic diameter of 10 micrometers or less. Now, the crucial thing to understand here is what that actually means on a biological level. Because these particles are so incredibly tiny, they easily bypass the human body's natural respiratory defenses. When nearby communities breathe this in, that soot doesn't just get coughed out. No, it lodges deep, deep into the lungs, causing acute and chronic health conditions. Let's demystify another major health hazard on that list, VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. The SAF standard defines these as carbon compounds that participate in atmospheric photochemical reactions. Okay, what does that actually mean in plain English? It means when these specific emissions leave the smokestack and hit the sunlight in the atmosphere, they react. They literally bake in the sun to create ground-level ozone, or smog. This is exactly why a steel plant doesn't just create a local dust problem. It can fundamentally alter the atmospheric chemistry of the entire surrounding region, triggering severe asthma and other health crises. Section 4. Expansion in emerging markets. The tension of global growth. Zooming back out for a second, we really have to look at the macroeconomic tension at play here. On one hand, we actually have some genuinely good news. Technological improvements and innovation have significantly reduced the amount of emissions generated per single ton of steel produced. The process itself is getting cleaner. However, countering that is this massive, relentless demand for steel to build infrastructure in developing nations. So, even though the industry is getting more efficient per ton, the sheer volume of increased expansion in emerging markets means that total overall air pollutants remain a massive critical concern. The absolute volume of production is just entirely outpacing those per ton efficiency gains.
Section 5. The regulatory constraint, connecting human lungs to the global market.
And this brings us to the very real financial and operational reality for these companies. Emerging markets desperately need steel to grow, for sure. But those severe, localized public health impacts we were just talking about, they're triggering strict new regulatory efforts. Governments are stepping in to protect their citizens' lungs. And as the SASB standard explicitly warns, these regulatory efforts to curb air pollution may actively constrain iron and steel production. Because think about it, if a plant cannot control its emissions of soot, lead, or VOCs, it might be forced by regulators to slow down or even shut down production completely. Health risks have fundamentally become business risks.
So how do companies actually navigate this? Well, the standards outline a fairly clear pathway. Step 1 is the active, rigorous management of facility emissions. You have to track those key pollutants precisely. Step 2 is the implementation of global industry best practices across all operations, regardless of whether a specific local law requires it yet. And Step 3 is utilizing these practices to transition to truly sustainable steel production. Companies that do this don't just protect the local communities, they reduce their own compliance costs, they prevent regulatory shutdowns, and they enhance their overall operational efficiency. It's really a win-win. To ground everything we've just discussed, we are pulling this information directly from the SASB standards, which are now part of the IFRS Foundation. Tracking these specific pollutants, understanding PM10 and VOCs, and managing fence line health impacts isn't just some activist wish list. It is a formalized, globally recognized financial accounting standard. Investors understand that if a steel company is poisoning the air, it is a highly fragile business facing imminent regulatory constraint. Look, technology is improving, but the global demand for steel is virtually insatiable right now. As we continue to build our modern world, we absolutely have to ensure that the invisible price of progress doesn't come at the cost of the lungs of those living right next door. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Can emerging markets build their future without sacrificing the air they breathe?